Hi Geoff.
Hi Bab.
How are you?
Good.
Good stuff.
What are we here to talk about?
Your new book. I was about to forget. Your new book, Notes from a Factory Floor.
Yeah, thank you.
It was very, very, what a read.
Intense.
Yes. Yeah. Different but the same to Watch My Back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it fills in all the gaps, doesn't it? That's what I really wanted to do. It was in that 30-year period between Watch My Back and now, there was just so many things I hadn't written about and so many things I hadn't covered, and so many people I bumped into who were talking, when they would meet me, they'd be looking at me and they'd be talking to Geoff the factory worker, or Geoff the bouncer, or Geoff the karate guy, or Geoff the guru, you know, Geoff the fashion model, you know. They were talking to different aspects of me, and I would be able to immediately know where they were in my life according to how they addressed me. But they would be talking to me about bouncing, and that guy wasn't there anymore. Or they'd be talking to me about, you know, combatives, and that guy wasn't there anymore. They'd be looking at me, looking for him, and I'm thinking, well, he doesn't know he's not there yet because it's moved on. It's moving on every 4 or 5 years. So the idea of this book is to bring myself up to date, but also to bring anybody that followed Watch My Back up to date and say, this is where I am now. I'm not, you know, I'm not still a bouncer. I'm not still working the doors. I haven't been in a fight for, I don't know, what time is it now? I mean, minutes, hours, Paul.
The day's not finished yet.
the day's not over yet. So, you know, it was, you're talking to people, and people are very lovely. They bump into you and they want to have a conversation with you. But they want to talk to you about, you know, how do you hold your hand and where do you hit somebody if you want to knock them out? And in my head, I'm thinking, I was talking about that 20 years ago, and it's very uncomfortable to talk about now because it's just not where I am. It's offensive. I don't mean they're offensive, but it's offensive for me to talk about it because I understand reciprocity and understand metaphysics. I understand that if I punch you in the face, I'm hurting myself more than I'm hurting you. You know, and my enemy couldn't hurt me, to quote St. Augustine, my enemy couldn't hurt me as much as I hurt myself when I hate them. You know, so I understand that when we have any kind of violence in us, we have to process it through us before we deliver it. So I can't talk about those kind of things. But it's not that those books aren't legitimate and those conversations aren't legitimate. They're not legitimate for me. So I wanted to fill in the gaps, and bring people up to date and say, this is where I am now, this is the journey. So it's also a didactic book, so people can read it and go, oh, that's how we did it, that's how we got a book published, that's how we learned to get a book published, that's how we learned to make a film. And also, I didn't realise until I kind of had a breakdown after writing it that it was it was my confessional. So I realised it was a confessional, and I realised it was there for a purpose. It was emptying me. Because you can't have the Christ energy enter you, that you can't have the dove enter you until you empty. So as I was going through it, I thought, oh, of course, yeah. And of course Sharon typed it all out, and there was things in there that Sharon didn't know about me. You know, she didn't know stuff about me, and she had to type it all out. So it was a confession to her as well.
Wow.
It was a complete, because I thought I'm either going to be completely honest or it's a waste of time. Either I am completely vulnerable or I'm wasting my time. It's not going to help anybody at all.
So it was a healing process for you.
It was an emptying. It was a healing. It was painful. Some of the stuff, you know, as you know with books and films, Paul, you know, when you're doing a book, I might have to go through that 40 or 50 times before it's polished. You know, and you know you've got someone's going to type it out. You've got to do the polishes. You've got to do the rewrites. Then you get a publisher, and then they go into it like surgically, like with a scalpel, pulling things out, you know. So you have to be completely honest. And the moment I finished that book, literally on the Friday, the idea came to write the Divine CEO. So it was like I'd emptied, and then I was refilled, because the Divine CEO wasn't written from my own knowledge. It came through me like I was a vessel. So I finished that on the Friday, and on the Monday I started the Divine CEO. Another 8 weeks, about 150,000 words, and this arcana, this hidden knowledge came through me. And
so that book wouldn't have been able to be written unless you'd written notes.
No,
so you kind of unlocked something in you to write the next.
If you imagine you've got a pipe with you know, tons and tons of clean water, but it's blocked by a detritus. It's blocked by something. You clear the blockage and then the clean water can come through. That's what happened. I got rid of I emptied myself, then I made room for the divine CEO to come through. And of course the divine CEO, it might be 150,000 words, but it's a seed. It's just a seed that I'm still unpacking. It's been published a few years now, and I am still unpacking it. So within that seed, you know, I'm processing that. I'm doing the rigor on it. I'm doing the homework on it, and the seed of the divine CEO has got the potential, like an oak tree, to grow, you know, 500 foot high and live for 500 years or something. And it has each oak tree has the potential to produce another 1,000,000 seeds, another 1,000,000, and each of those 1,000,000 have the potential to produce another 1,000,000, and then each of those millions and billions have, you know, so it's infinite. So I realised that the divine CEO wasn't the end of the story. Notes wasn't the end of the story. Divine CEO wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. It's a seed that I'm still learning now. Well, actually, I'm still learning now from when I worked the doors. When I wrote notes, it taught me what I learnt on the doors.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it's almost like a full circle, but with things that you've learned. Yeah. You've kind of gone through this massive journey, and you've returned to lots of themes in this. Was very similar to Watch My Back, but from a different perspective. From a different perspective,
from a learning perspective, from a retrospect. So you're saying I worked as a bouncer, and people thought I was a knuckle dragger, but it was actually the most metaphysical experience of my life. And everything I learned there about certainty, you know, is still unpacking now 30 years later. I'm still only now starting to understand what I learnt by placing myself in an environment that was life and death. So you go into an environment like the door, and it has its own egregore, has its own. An egregore is like a being or a consciousness that is all of the collective parts, but it's greater than it's greater than the sum of its parts. So if you go into a job like like working the door, where it's life and death, the environment teaches you what works. It doesn't care about lineage. It doesn't care about grade. It doesn't care about position. It doesn't care about wealth. It doesn't care about reputation. It doesn't care about any of that. It just says, this is the environment. This is the collective amount of information from thousands and thousands of years of people working security. We can show you immediately what will work in this environment. But to get this information, you may have to let go of everything else you've ever learned.
Yeah. You can't bring it to suit your training. You have to rise. Yeah, which we're going to get into that actually, because what we can do is go through the chapters and just things that kind of resonated with me.
I think it's good if you can go through the chapters and look at things that stood out for you, because I wrote it in the stream of consciousness, and there's always a danger that you know, what you write might seem really ordinary. Like for instance, I'm writing a book for a company at the moment. Called 99 Reasons to Forgive, and she said, I've gone through all this, and there's no mention at all that you're an 8th Dan, that you're a senior martial artist. And I said, well, I've written about it so often, I'm bored. I said, I didn't think you'd want to hear about that. She said, but I've never heard about it. I've gone online and saw it, and I'm thinking, why isn't he doing this from that perspective? So I didn't see that. I never saw that. She saw it. So I think it's good for you to go through and see things that I'm so close to. I don't think I can see, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I've known you for 20 years.
Yeah,
has it been?
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting what you said before, that people who you haven't seen for a while, and then who you've met, they didn't know which part of the journey you were at. But because I've known you for so long,
you've been on all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult to kind of see you as anything how you are today.
Yeah.
But going through this, it was really interesting to kind of go back and, you know, see how you've interpreted stuff that's happened to you and brought it back. It's been really interesting, because my first introduction to you was from Watch My Back.
Yeah, and the Animal Day stuff.
It was the Animal Day, yeah. It was the training, really. Actually, going a bit further back than that, it was someone who gave me the pavement arena in a gym.
Yeah, yeah.
He saw that I was doing some
really simple book, but a very profound book, because it's saying, this is what you've got. and this is where you want to make it work, and this is what you have to do to adapt it. And even I, as a teacher, can't teach you that. If you really want to know what works, at some point you're going to have to place yourself in that environment, and the egregore of that environment will teach you, but it won't care about niceties. It won't, you know, like I was on the door. I don't want to offend my teachers. I've got gods as teachers, you know, Terry O'Neill and Bob Poynton and people like John Johnson. You know, these guys were the gods of Shotokan. You don't want to go on the, you don't want to write down, you don't want to go on the door and then the environment say, we don't recognise those people. This is what we're going to teach you about this environment. So you have to be prepared, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, as Arjuna says to, as Lord Krishna says to Arjuna when he goes into battle. Because Arjuna goes into battle and suddenly he's fighting for his kingdom and he suddenly falls into fear because he sees his teachers in the enemy lines. He sees his family, his cousins, his friends, his parents, and he doesn't want to offend them. You know, and Krishna's saying to him, you have to kill your old teachers. None of that is relevant anymore. You listen to me. Obviously, Krishna represents consciousness. He's saying, my view is a view above all of those views. That's a world view. I'm going to show you a universal view. I'm going to show you the view from consciousness above denotation. So you have to be prepared to abandon your teachers, and you have to be prepared for them to attack you and hate you, because you're just interested in the truth, and I'm going to show you the truth. But you can't have the truth and the untruth in the same cup at the same time. They don't mix. So you have to be prepared to get rid of all of the other stuff. And it got you this far, so that's good. It's not that they're wrong, but they've given you as an interim truth. Even if they're experienced in that world, like Terry O'Neill was very experienced in, you know, working on the doors, but he still can't teach me what works. Because only the environment can teach me that. God gives everybody something a little bit different, and a different piece of the jigsaw. So what was given to Terry isn't going to be good for me, and what's been good for me isn't going to be good for anybody else, other than as a starter for 10. So you have to go into the environment. Now you can tell people all day long about film. It won't make no difference until they go and make a film. I did a 3-day shoot on Bouncer with Ray Winston. I learned more in 3 days than I'd learnt in the previous 10 years. I was on set going, oh, so that's how it works. Oh, and it was massive expansion, because the environment grabbed me and said, here's Geoff Thompson. This is his first screenplay. This is where he wants to be. This is the pace he can go at. This is how open he is. This is what we can teach him at this moment. It's still only an interim truth. But the environment, I mean, the lessons I got from that, Paul, was so overwhelming. The energy that rushed into me was so overwhelming. I thought I was going to collapse. I felt ill.
Emotion, just information overload.
It was essence that was coming through.
And
me.
Truth, like you said.
It wasn't anything anybody said. Yes. It was just like it was like a kundalini had rushed through my body, and I had to really adapt and adjust myself to be able to cope with this new level of energy. You know, and it took me quite a while to get that. I've really felt the energy affecting my body. You know, where you think I'm going to have a heart attack or a stroke or something, because it was a rush. And it wants to just spill, it wants to go into excitement, but you have to contain it, and you have to just watch it and observe it. So I've had that happen a lot, but the environment taught me. And when you've got certainty, people will travel from across the globe to a little shitty, to a little shitty gym in Coventry to stand in front of you, because you have access certainty. But the certainty is not yours. The certainty was given to you as a gift from the environment. Some people go on the doors and they don't get that gift. You know?
And you have to work at it as well. I mean, you had to be there. You had to accept that you weren't in control of this. And you had to... your flow was the pace of where you were, the environment. You couldn't control it. And then once you adapt to that, that's when you can harness that truth.
It's very Tao. Yeah. You have to go with the flow of it, and the moment you resist it, it's extremely painful. I watch people crushed by the energy. I watch people murdered. I watch people go insane. I watch people become, extreme career criminals and end up doing life in prison. I watch people lose their courage because of one decision or because of too many drinks, and never recover from it. This energy is it's neutral, but if you don't control it, it's very damaging. It's like electricity coming through a damaged cable. Anybody that touches it's going to get zapped. So you have to learn to build. You have to create a vacuum. So you have to have this vacuum around yourself, and you have, like a light bulb. You'll imagine a light bulb. It's in a vacuum state. You've got a left terminal, a negative terminal of energy, and a positive terminal of energy, and you place the filament between the two that connects them. That's what creates light. Well, we are the filament that sit between. Our soul is the filament that sits between the positive and negative energies that this environment will teach us. We have to sit in there, and we have to develop our filament or our soul so it has a very, very high burning point. Then we can create light. And that you'll only get that by being in the environment. You won't get it by, you might come and stand with me or someone else that's been in that environment, excuse me, and it will jump over like electricity, and you'll feel it and you'll be inspired, but it won't last very long. At some point you have to take yourself into the environment, and you have to say to the environment, will you please teach me? That's what I did with judo, that's what I did with Thai, that's what I did with wrestling. I went into the environment, and the kids in there weren't my teachers. So I trained full time with Neil Adams for 18 months, and at his elite class. The environment taught me. Neil is a bit like John Anderson. He didn't speak very much, and the adjustments he made were tiny, but he knew that the environment would teach me.
Yes, yeah. I mean, just rolling with him would teach you.
Yeah, well,
I've had an armbar off him.
Yeah,
and there was nowhere to move.
He's as tight as a folk singer's fringe. That's how tight he is.
That's the thing. When you come up against people like that, you think there is no wiggle room. It's certain. But
why is there no wiggle room? Because he's placed himself in an environment that does not accommodate wiggle room.
Yep.
So my judo become extremely tight because every time I changed partner, I was with an Olympic squad member. Every time I changed partner, I was with a British champion, a European champion, a world champion. They were all Olympic players. They were all very, very senior guys. So you get really tight. You close everything down. And to get tight and to close things down, it's uncomfortable. If you put an armbar on, you're sitting back with it. If you move forward a little tiny bit, a 13-stone man will climb through a gap that small. I've watched it. So you have to learn. The environment and the level teaches you to be tight. The door was the same. You're on the door. You make a mistake, you die. That's it. So that's ultimate. So the more intense the environment you go into, the richer the lessons and the stronger the egregore. Yep. And the egregore, if you're listening, the egregore will go, we'll protect you, we'll take you through this, we'll show you exactly how to meet it. So that certainty then is gold. It's gold.
You have to surrender to it as well, don't you? I mean, in the sense of there's no ego. You can't bring ego. And I've seen, probably you've seen as well, a lot of people who've come in who on paper should be dominant, on paper are stronger, and because of technique and because of the training that they've been beaten, they've never come back. No. They've gone out very dejected, wondering they couldn't handle it.
You have to, at some point, if you want to find this certainty, in Islam they call it yaqeen, and in Judaism they call it da'at. It's spelled D-A-A-T, but it's pronounced with an S at the end, and it is the certainty that comes from taking a spark of wisdom and processing it until it tips into a certainty. The certainty is a gift, but once you've got it, you feel it. So if I stand in front of you with my hand, I can feel the certainty of this right hand. If I gripped you from my time in judo, the moment I grip you, there is a certainty that comes in that can't be faked, that can't be sold, it can't be bought, it can't be bartered for, it can't be taken off me. The moment you access certainty, or yaqeen, you access a part of God. It's an appendage of God. So if you imagine in Islam they talk about the 99 names of Allah. Each of them has a separate attribute, but each attribute, like compassion or love or forgiveness or kindness, each attribute has a piece of certainty, and within that piece of certainty is the whole of God. So when we access a certainty, it makes us very attractive. It makes us attractive because people feel God through that certainty. So all we're looking for is certainty. All we're looking for is your keen. But that, as you said, is that is the process that we go through. And the process might take us into, well, it will ask for complete surrender, but it will take us into environments that will teach us very quickly. But most people don't want to go into environments. They want to talk to people who have been in environments. Mm-hmm. But that won't do much. It will give them an idea of what they're looking for, but to get it,
you have to put yourself in the
you've got to be in
reality.
The environment, yeah. And it's like I say, I remember someone saying to me once, well, my friend isn't as good a martial artist as me, and he did well on the door, so that means I would do well on the door. But how do you know until you go on the door? Because the door is, it's like an acid test. If there are any weaknesses at all, they'll be highlighted on day one. Because someone will come up to the door. It doesn't care whether you're a first dan or a second dan. It doesn't care if you're desperate dan. He's just going to come up and he's going to challenge your authority because he's had a bad day, a bad week, a bad year, a bad life. Mm-hmm. And he's going to attack any authority figure. And if you show a weakness at all, this will be manipulated and engineered until it's a cavernous hole that everybody will walk through. It's
a psychological aspect of it. That's the physical, as well as the physical.
Yeah, the physical game, the physical game. I remember one of my karate friends saying to me, I sparred with Seymour the other day, and he goes, and I thought, you arrogant bastard, this Seymour is a legend. He's a legend. So he's not brilliant on the bag. So he's a little bit older than you, and you dominated him in the spar. Believe me, you go on the door with this guy, he would have your back anywhere. Anybody that he hadn't fought on the Coventry doors wasn't worth talking about. He was a legendary character. When I got a job with him, I felt like I'd been signed for United. I loved him. He was a black guy, very handsome, very smooth. Even his security badge was professionally taken. He was just one of these real smooth guys. But man, he was when it came to courage and working the doors, he was the man. But somebody else who was a karate, one of my friends who was a competition fighter, wasn't impressed. I said, well, if you come and stand on the door for a night, you'll be falling at his feet in awe because he's amazing. He's just an amazing. I can't stop telling people how amazing he is. I loved him, and it's. But he got that from the environment, and he would even take those views and wouldn't worry him. It wouldn't worry him what anybody else thought because he knows when it comes to it. He knows the gears he's got.
He can handle the danger. He can handle the situation.
One of my students says, "I think I'm ready to do the door now." I said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I don't, I know I would never lose my bottle." I said, "Well, I already know you're not ready to do the door because I couldn't tell you that, and I've been doing it for years." I said, "How do you feel about someone ringing you at 4 a.m, threatening to shoot your wife and children?" He said, "Oh, I don't want that." I said, "Then don't work the door because that might happen the first night you work. It will certainly happen at some point." So it's a different world. It's when you bring these other ingredients in, it's a different world. It's not about having a fight. It's about being able to deal with the pre-fight, about the in-fight, the post-fight. It's been able to control the endocrine system. Most people can't even, most people can't fight the tide in the bath, let alone control the endocrine system. The endocrine system, this rush of passions, even for the most experienced people, takes a tremendous strength. And where's that strength built? You build an eyewall and you sit in the middle and you watch the passions and they rush in and they try to storm the fort, but you've built an eyewall. And the eyewall absorbs the majority of that, that fire, and you keep protected in the centre. But if the eyewall breaks, you're gone. I've watched several of my friends who were doormen, and I've watched several of my friends who were businessmen who I've watched their eyewall crack, and I've watched them fall into the chaos of life, and some of them never recovered. This that lovely thing that we need to build an eyewall. How do we build an eyewall? By putting ourselves into a storm. Oh, nice. Who wants to put themselves into a storm? People want to go and sit with somebody who's been in a storm, but that doesn't build an eyewall. What builds an eyewall is a tremendous rush of passions.
When you came to write this, you said that the timing for creativity is rarely right, which I think all creatives will Suddenly, as soon as you want to do something, it's amazing how many light bulbs need changing. How many things in your house.
How much opposition you get.
Yeah. Why do you think that happens?
I think it's because when we start to create, if you imagine, we said about the light bulb before, negative, positive, the filament. When we place the filament or the soul between those forces, we create light. That's how we create light. So when you come to create, the negative side of you will resist. The positive side of you is willing. The negative side of you will resist massively. And you have to place yourself as a conductor between the two. So you literally have to burn in order to create. So Viktor Frankl said, those that heal must first burn. So what he's saying is, to create, we need to burn. So when I come and sit and write a book, all of that negative energy that rises in opposition will be consumed in the volition of writing the book. It will be converted. It will be literally will be oil for the lamp. So in the Old Testament they call it the burnt sacrifice, or the animal sacrifice. It wasn't literal. It wasn't really about sacrificing animals. It was about sacrificing the part of the animal soul, or sacrificing or burning the part of the animal soul, the negative. So the negative and the positive are burnt in the volition of creativity. That's why it's so difficult, and that's why you need to, if you can, build yourself, train like an elite athlete in order to create. Otherwise you won't create with any longevity. So if you look at someone like Rumi, he said, there is a field beyond good and bad, I'll meet you there. And what he means is, if you imagine negative and positive, and then we create a field of light, don't we? That's where he said, that's where I'll meet you. There's no longer a good, there's no longer a good, there's no longer a bad, there's no longer like a willing energy and a negative energy. There's no negative or positive anymore, there's just light. So this is what in Judaism they say the same. Friends meet in a narrow place. So we've got the negative and the positive, and friends meet in the narrow place is this very thin filament. Does this make sense, Paul?
Yeah.
Very thin filament. Yeah. So friends, no longer enemies, no longer friends, just friends meet in a narrow place. So we have to be prepared to place ourselves as a conductor, our will, which is the attribute of the soul, between negative and positive. If you're going to do anything really worthwhile, like I had a lot of violence in me, and a lot of, I was abused when I was a kid, so I had a lot of dissonance, and because of the dissonance I self-abused, and I sexually self-abused, so I got a lot of guilt and shame. When I sit and write notes from a factory floor, I'm taking all of that shame, all that anger, or that guilt, or that dissonance, and I am literally burning it as fuel. It's a literal thing, it's not a metaphor. But of course, all of those energies, the shame, it's not just the energy, it's a semi-autonomous thought form. It lives in you, it's a parasite, it feeds off you. So of course it's going to put up massive resistance, because it knows it's going to be burnt. But actually it's not really being burnt, it's going into a place of transition. It's when you do a book like that, so you're doing, this is the physical book, Notes from a Factory Floor. That's negative and positive energy joined together to create something beautiful. So what's in here is beautiful because it's no longer negative or positive, it's just truth. So that is the physical manifestation, but that isn't just a book either. If you look at the words and the pictures in here, every one of those words contains spirit, contains the paraclete, or the holy dove, or spirit. It contains inspirational energy. So when that's sat in there now, and it's sat there, it's not doing anything. But the moment someone picks it up and reads it, it will put inspiration into them. And inspiration is like an antivirus that goes into them and gradually starts to work away. So when you talk about the paraclete or the intercessor or the great comforter, that's what it is. So if you've got the courage to burn up your sin and put it into something creative, it will stay in there and act as a living spirit forever. So that can go on and on now. People can read that and go, I'm going to change my life, I'm going to do something better, I'm going to be kinder. But that's why it's so hard. Creativity is hard because we have to burn the negative and the positive in order to make light. That's why it's so difficult. Yeah. So the more opposition, the more likely it's going to be great.
Because you also had to dig very deep. And like you're saying, you uncovered things that you didn't know you were going to uncover. And it's easier not to do it. And put things in your way and say, I'm busy, because it's things that, it's painful things that you had to revisit, and painful things that you had to look at to kind of bring it out into the light.
It's all stuck in the plumbing, Paul. So I'm not going to be able to have the Christ energy enter me if I've still got negative energy there. I've got to choose. You know, do I want to be Christed? To be Christed means to be magnified. So be magnified by it means to be magnified by 1,000 times, and that's not just a metaphor either. That's a literal thing. So when we clean out the detritus and we give it life somewhere else in a book or a film, we empty ourselves and we make room for the Paraclete to enter, for the Spirit to enter, or for the Christ energy to enter. So if you imagine a glass of water like that, that's a glass of water. You imagine a bottle of concentrated orange juice. So you've got orange concentrate and water, are two separate things. If you pour a tiny little bit of orange concentrate into there, that's no longer water, and it's no longer orange concentrate. It becomes something different. So that's what happens with the Holy Dove or the Christ energy. A part of it, when you make room, a part of it is poured into you, and it mingles with everything else. So you no longer, it's no longer me, and it's no longer Christ. It's like both. So you become Christed. So it becomes a new energy. But you have to, you have to make room for that. This energy won't enter you while you're still unclean. It won't sit there. It's torture for the soul to sit in a body that isn't clean. If the body goes towards any kind of pornography, what I mean by pornography is excess. If it goes towards any kind of negativity, it's torture for the soul. The soul is childlike, and it is affected massively by any kind of excess. So we have to know ourselves enough to keep ourselves clean, to keep ourselves centered, and to protect this seed of God in us, and develop it and nurture it and not expose it to anything negative, nothing at all. So the whole process of creativity takes tremendous courage, especially if you're going to do it, consistently, if you're going to keep doing it. And it means digging deep, because, we have to dig deep. We have to be like a pin in a crab shell, because if we don't get all that stuff out, the new energy won't come in. It won't sit in there. It's like the allegory of the princess and the pea. She's got 20 mattresses, but she can still feel a pea at the very bottom. So that's what this energy is like. If there's any negativity left in us, it won't come in, it won't stay, it won't settle.
And another thing that really resonated was when you came to write it, if there wasn't a strong purpose, why would you go through that pain? Like, why would you dig? And so it's really important for people to, when they're coming up to do anything, to have their purpose, or what I'd like to say, why. If you can answer that why, and it makes sense, then you can go through the pain. You can go through what's about to be asked of you.
If you can find the why, you'll find the how. This is what Viktor Frankl found. Viktor Frankl was a doctor who ended up in Auschwitz, and what he discovered in Auschwitz was that purpose is what kept people alive. He called it logos. He developed a system called Logotherapy. So it's man's search for meaning, or search for purpose. So you can heal people just by giving them a purpose. But the word logos comes from it means the word of God. So it means, we're literally, the word of God is always translated as Christ, or the Christ energy. So if you find the purpose, it might just be that you just find a purpose, and that gets you into training every day, or that gets you to write. And it might be a temporary purpose. It might be that you want to buy a house, or that you want to buy your mum a house, or that you want a bigger car. They're purposes. But the ultimate purpose is the logos, and the logos is the word of God. So it means that we want to aim for the big goal, which is I want to make myself accessible to the Christ energy, or accessible to consciousness. And to do that, I have to be prepared to go into the very deepest corners of my body and mind, and they'll be presented to you. But it's not you that atones them. It's not you that cleans them. It's what we have to do is watch them. Jung would call it individuation. So all this unconscious stuff has to rise up, and we have to be able to watch it and observe it without engaging it, and then it is cleaned by God. It's taken back into consciousness.
Yeah.
But as it rises, it is fighting to get your attention. It's fighting to get your engagement. So you have to have a very, very strong eye wall. You have to be able to sit in the very centre and watch these passions rise up, and a bit like standing in a nightclub door and you've got people outside posturing and shouting and screaming, and you have to stand there and hold that door, hold that entrance. So you have to build a very strong eye wall to do that. And we come back to what we said before. You build an eye wall by placing yourself in a storm.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the door as well, that was something that I remember reading in Watch My Back, saying that you're in an environment where it's very easy to walk away. You know, why wouldn't you walk away if you're getting threats to your life? But you had a why. And that's what I found quite fascinating, was that you could tolerate and you could bear what was happening to you because the why was much bigger and there was a purpose. You were on a pilgrimage.
I was,
and the door was the early steps of your pilgrimage, but you knew that once you went through what was happening to you on the door, that was going to be the next step onto this, kind of...
well, they're all the lessons you take to the next stage.
Yeah.
Because once you found a certainty with one thing, you can find a certainty with all things, because if you master one thing, you master them all.
Yeah.
You know, because the process is exactly the same. So the door was my grounding, my foundation, you know. I remember working with a woman called Karen Manderbach in television, and she said to me, she was like a legendary producer, and she said to me, this is a very, very tough industry, very tough. And I said, well, in my last job, people tried to kill me. I said, I'm presuming it's no tougher than that. And she looked at me and she said, no, it's not. It gives you a perspective. You know what I mean? You do go into areas. I've gone into areas since the door that were tougher than the door. You know, I've gone into the greater jihad, the internal battles, which were much harder than the door. But the door gave me a perspective. It gave me reference points, and it gave me certainties. I always recognised from the door that any monsters that raised up, any fears that came, were always projections of my own unconscious. And if I could see that, I wouldn't be fooled by them. If I was able to stand in front of them and not engage them, they had no life.
But I think the why, again, just touching on that again, if you were doing it for the money, or if you were doing it for some form of, acclaim that was local, I think you would have come off the door the first night.
That wouldn't have worked.
It was. I think people.
You're aiming for freedom, Paul. That's what you're aiming for. I mean, ultimately, you're aiming for freedom. I wanted to overcome this fear. I wanted to understand why I was so afraid, and why the people around me weren't teaching me. They weren't showing me. How to not be afraid. So I remember going through a very, very dark kenosis, a very dark cleansing, and I walked with Tony Summers, and he said to me, "What do you want?" I said, "I want to be free." I knew what I wanted. I said, I want to be free, but I didn't know what that meant. I know what it means now. I know it means to win my will back, to captain my will, to snaffle my will back from all of the addictions and all of the excesses that I'd allowed into my life, all of these negative covenants. I wanted to win my will back. So I knew that freedom meant winning my will. But then the next big thing is that once you've won your will, if you want to go to the next level, you have to surrender that will to God or to a higher force. So that's been a process for me as well, where you go, I'm going to take off all my armour, and I'm going to let go of all. Budo means to let go of arms, to fight without arms. I'm going to let go of all that, and I'm just going to trust in this force to protect me. I'm going to let go of the need to make money. I'm going to let go of the need to be validated or to win awards. I'm just going to let God supply everything I need. As long as I do what I'm meant to do, then everything I need will come. So that's the ultimate thing, the ultimate purpose is to surrender your will to God. And I've had people say to me, I don't need to come and do your course because I've already surrendered my will to God. And I'm thinking, well, you haven't really, because you haven't got it to surrender. You've got to win it back before you can surrender it. You can't surrender something you haven't got, can you? If you still got, if you're still 3 or 4 stone overweight, you aren't in control of your will. If you're still watching pornography, if you're still excited by violent films, if you're still massively ambitious, if you're still judgmental or greedy, or if you gossip, you haven't won your will. You can't give away what's not yours. You have to win your will back first. This is the allegory of Odysseus when he comes back from the Trojan Wars to his kingdom at Ithaca, only to find it overrun by vagabonds. And no one recognises him, not even his wife, and his servants don't recognise him. And it's an allegory for waking up. We wake up spiritually and we go, I'm awake. I am the sovereign of this billion cell body, but I'm not in charge of it. It's been overrun by concepts and precepts, and by opinions and by beliefs and by habits and by addictions and by opinions. I'm not in control of this kingdom. I don't have any control over any of the territories. So Odysseus has to go back from the Trojan Wars, and he has to win his kingdom back. Arjuna loses his kingdom to his corrupt cousins, and he has to go to war to win it back. You know, all of the allegories are exactly the same. You know, Christ has to go through the stations, the 12 stations of the cross, in order to transcend to the soul. You know, he has to completely abandon and fight against all the different passions. So all of the stories in all of the Bibles is telling you the same thing. The will and the intellect are attributes of the soul, but the main thing is that we have to have the will. If we haven't got control of the will, then we haven't got free will, and it means that the next clickbait will take our will off us like that and send us down a rabbit hole.